Wake up. It's Sleep Unplugged with Dr. Chris Winter, episode 24, Alcohol and Sleep. Raise a glass to terrible rest. Welcome, everyone, to episode 24 of Sleep Unplugged. I'm Dr. Chris Winter, sleep specialist and neurologist, and your host for an episode that has been requested by many people. And I thought that we would hold off on it until the holidays. And I know for people who listen to the show, you're thinking, wait a minute, first Monday of December, it's an insomnia topic. And I thought, what better insomnia topic than alcohol? Because alcohol in the United States is the number one sleep aid. And it's estimated that about 1 in 10 Americans are using alcohol for sedation or for sleep. So I thought, well, this is perfect. It's that time of year. We're going to holiday parties. We have the opportunity to drink alcohol. And I thought this would be a good time to really talk about it, what it is and isn't doing for people, and clearing up a few misconceptions about alcohol that often arise when we sort of confuse the acute effects of alcohol versus chronic effects, etc. So we'll dive into it. I'm really excited about that. So I thought somebody said many episodes ago when I was putting it out there, what what do you want to hear? What do you think could make the show better? And somebody wrote, I don't really remember, I got a Twitter. So if you want to contact the show, I really read every communication. Dr. Chris Winter Twitter, Dr. Chris Winter Instagram, Dr. Chris Winter TikTok. You can contact the show that way, and I try to put good information up about our episodes. I appreciate the feedback about last week's episode on light. That was a lot of fun. But somebody many episodes back said you should do what they do on NPR, where the reporter goes out into the field, and if she's interviewing farmers, you can actually hear the tractor start, or you hear her walking through the field. This sort of auditory texture and feel to the episode. So I'm not sure I could do that, although I thought, well, maybe one evening I'll sip some coffee. But I thought tonight this would be great. I'll actually grab an alcoholic beverage. I seem to be drinking the Firestone Nitro Merlin Milk Stout tonight. I know very little about alcohol. I don't drink it very often. It's fun at certain occasions if somebody wants to make a fun mixed drink or a good Moscow Mule, but I'm not a big drinker. So I think somebody must have brought this beverage to my home, maybe for a get together or something, and I found it in the fridge. So for that individual who said you need more sound textural elements to your episode, there we go. We are drinking on the episode of alcohol tonight, to make some points. And I'll tell you a quick story before we dive in. I do some work with Precision Nutrition. That's paid work, just sort of to make sure that that connection is put out there. And I was working with them, and they said, the people who come to us for our products are often interested in elements beyond nutrition as it pertains to coaching and getting people to be their best and most healthy self. And so I helped them develop a sleep curriculum, and they were wonderful to work with, very professional, very measured, which I always appreciate. And they said, it'd be a lot of fun if we got all of our coaches together and the people who subscribe to what we do, and we'll do this sort of fun experiment where you can sign up to be in one of three groups. And as long as you have some sort of Oura ring or a Withings band or some sort of device that you can track your sleep with, you can be a part of it. And you can sign up to be in the alcohol group, the light group, or the temperature group. And depending on what group you signed up for, if you were in the temperature group, you spent 2 weeks sleeping in a relatively warm environment, and then 2 weeks sleeping in a cooler environment. And you looked at your watch to see your tracker or your ring or whatever to see which one was better for your sleep. Did the same thing with darkness. Let's make the room really dark, or wear a mask, and the other group didn't. I decided to participate in this as just for fun, and my thought was I want to be in the alcohol group. If somebody really doesn't drink alcohol, I'm curious, what would it do to me? So I had these, what were they called? It was like the Dragon Stout. It was some, stout that was aged in bourbon barrels, and I think each one was 11% alcohol. Yeah, it was the Dragon's Milk Bourbon Aged Stout, 11% alcohol by volume. And I would drink two of those every night right before I went to bed for 2 weeks. And invariably, I would forget to drink it. And my wife would say, "Hey, as I was sitting here brushing my teeth, like we were actively going to bed, she said, Chris, you forgot your alcohol." I'm like, "Oh, go downstairs, get these bourbon aged stouts and drink them, just shotgun them one after the other, and then go to bed." I was miserable. It was interesting. My watch didn't really show a massive difference. It was worse, but the way I felt was significantly worse than what my watch was saying. So let's dive into exactly what's going on with alcohol. Before we get going, we always like to take viewer comments. I'm going to do a couple of them here. This one is from Brendan RPSGT, a friend of the show. He wrote in, "Greetings. I'm on a train to watch the Newark Rangers, who I used to work with, and he's a big fan of. Listening to your podcast on mild sleep apnea, excellent and entertaining." That was episode 5 he's referring to. "I need to retire, so I have time to listen to all these great podcasts out there. Some thoughts. Number one, I listened twice, but don't believe you mentioned if the slim pigs developed high blood pressure or not. Maybe I missed it twice." You probably didn't miss it. So, what he's referring to is back in episode 5, we talked about doing sleep apnea research in these little thin pigs. We were giving them sleep apnea by putting either breast implants or inflatable balloons in them. And what happened was when we would actually give the thin pigs sleep apnea, they did in fact develop high blood pressure. So we sort of showed in that model that it wasn't necessarily the weight causing the pig to develop high blood pressure, that actually just having sleep apnea in a lean model could do it as well. So great pickup. I'd forgotten I did this. And then he brought up another interesting point. "I say Colin Sullivan was the first to use CPAP on humans. See the attached link below. Don't forget about good old Elliot Phillipson for being the inspiration." So I'll post that on my platform. But thanks for listening to the show, Brendan. We really appreciate it. I'll also do one more. Gray Meckling, a friend of the show. "Hi, Dr. Winter. Recently discovered your podcast, and it's easily one of my favorites. Appreciate that, Gray. That means a lot. I'm a psychiatry resident, and I'm wondering if you could do an intro segment on pursuing a career in sleep medicine. Anything from choosing a fellowship program to practice settings, day in and day out, being a sleep specialist would be great to hear." I think that's a great idea. We covered it a little bit, at least what I went through uh, to be a sleep specialist in episode 1, my intro. But for those of you who are actually thinking about a career in sleep, I can talk a little bit about the medical career in sleep. There's all kinds of different avenues to pursue out there. Gray sounds like he's a psychiatrist. I'm a neurologist. It's one of the great things about sleep. I was looking at the University of Michigan's announced sleep fellows. They just had what's called match day for fellowship. So if you're a neurology resident and you're going into your fellowship, I did my fellowship at Chapel Hill. Hello, Brad Vaughn and everybody down at UNC. I did my fellowship there, so you match there. And quick story, maybe I'll post it if I can find it. On my application for sleep fellowship, they wanted a picture of me, and usually just do a headshot. I actually took a picture of myself sleeping and sent it to them, and they still chose me. So anyway, so yeah, Gray, we'll do that at some point and talk about that pathway and what a career in sleep can look like. So here's my nitro, what was this thing, Firestone Nitro Merlin Milk Stout. Cheers to Brendan. Cheers to Gray. Thank you for listening to the show, and thank you everybody out there. Um, okay, here we are. So alcohol. Let's talk about it. Alcohol is important. One more quick correction too before we get going. I said in a tweet that Karen Johnson was actually responsible for the play that resulted in the goal for the United States men's soccer team during the game against Iran. Once again, I've made a mistake about Karen Johnson. That is not true. She had nothing to do with developing that soccer play that resulted in the goal scored by Team USA. So that was a mistake. You can follow Dr. Johnson and her work at Dr. Sleepy Karin, Karin. And once again, I think this is probably the fourth time I've made a mistake about Dr. Johnson in my show or social media. She had nothing to do with the goal against Iran. She was not involved in that play. All right, so moving on to alcohol. Alcohol is important because a lot of people drink it. And it's important too because a lot of people drink it to help them sleep. And one of the things that I want to say up front here is that I'm not against alcohol. One of the reasons I wanted to drink an alcoholic beverage during the show was because I did not want to come off as the anti-alcohol zealot. I'm not. I drank a lot more when I was younger, probably. I mean, I don't know what that is, relatively, beers at football games and things like that. But pretty quickly, it became apparent between a couple things. Number one, when I was a medical school resident fellow, we still have a lot of time for sleep. And when you paired alcohol with sleep deprivation, it was sort of a 1 + 1 = 4 thing. It was terrible. So we really just didn't have a lot of opportunities to drink a lot of alcohol. And when you did, you just felt miserable going to work the next day. So I sort of moved away from alcohol from a relatively young age, but again, still find it fine. And there are people out there who are real connoisseurs with it. There are people out there who can't imagine, mowing the lawn and coming in and not having a beer, or going out to a nice restaurant and not having a glass of wine at their favorite pasta place. I deal with a lot of athletes, and alcohol is a part of some of their lives. And what I want to say about alcohol from the onset is, if you want to drink alcohol and it brings some sort of pleasure to you, I think you should. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. What I'm cautious of and want to warn people about is establishing a relationship in your mind between alcohol and good sleep. That should never be part of the equation. I'm going to drink this drink because it's going to help me sleep well tonight. It's not. And that's why I thought that this was a fair topic for our insomnia series. So, for those of you new to the show, we talk about a topic related to insomnia the first Monday of every month. So, here we are again. I think the last one we did was on paradoxical insomnia. That was episode 20. And we've talked about sleeping pills. We've talked about the trauma of insomnia. We've talked about a bunch of things out there. You can find them on the list there if you need them. And I talk about alcohol and insomnia a lot in my books, Sleep Solution and The Rested Child, if you're interested. So we just want to divorce those two thoughts, that when you're sitting down at night and getting ready to have your second or your third alcoholic beverage, the thought should be, this is the best Super Bowl party ever. I can't believe my team is winning. Of course, I'm going to have another drink because all my friends are here and we're really celebrating this great moment. My sleep's going to be rough tonight. In fact, I'll probably get kicked out of the bed by my wife because of my snoring and my breathing disturbances and my talking and whatever. But it's worth it to me because of whatever. So it's just a big equation. So when I talk to athletes all the time, I tell them, look, you can drink all you want. You just need to drink your alcohol with breakfast. That's my joke. Do not drink alcohol with breakfast. My point being, move the alcohol away from your sleep. You want to have a beer when you get home from work? Great. Do it as soon as you walk through the door so you can have much more time between the consumption of that alcoholic beverage and the metabolism and before you go to bed at night. So, again, not against alcohol. I am very much against the idea that alcohol is going to make you sleep better. So where does this come from? I think, once again, and we've talked about this in previous episodes, it really boils down to the verb work. Hey, doc, I hear what you're saying about alcohol, but I don't know. For me, when I drink a six pack after I get home, I just feel like it really works for me. So what is somebody saying when they say work? What is their metric? What is their decision process that's going on here that's making them feel like the alcohol is in fact a positive when it comes to their sleep. And that's very simple. It's speed to sedation. And we've talked about this before. One of the underlying tenets of insomnia is a discomfort, fear, and anxiety, a trauma related to being in bed awake when your plan was to fall asleep. And frankly, we can just say it, fall asleep quickly. You've gotten in bed and you wanted to fall asleep quickly. Your partner did, they're gone, but you're still awake. Does alcohol shorten the time it takes between getting into bed, turn the light out, and falling asleep? Absolutely. I don't think there's really any question. So when you actually look at the data on alcohol, time and time again, reduced sleep latency pops up. And that's not just a problem with alcohol. I was just having a conversation with a doctor, actually in another country. We share a client, and the conversation was going down the lines of, yes, well, I'm using this unusual drug, and it's working very well for our shared client. I'm like, no, it's not. It's just sedating our client faster. I don't consider that working well at all. In fact, I consider that a big problem for a lot of reasons. And for those of you who listen to the show, you probably know what they are. So if we're going into this thinking, I need something that works, and I'm defining work by makes me unconscious fast, sure, alcohol will do it. And it's interesting because alcohol does not have an FDA approval for sleep, as you can imagine. There are a lot of other drugs that we use. When I say we, I mean the collective medical body, not myself personally, used to make people fall asleep faster. And one of the things I often tell people is there's very little difference between what you are taking, what your doctor is giving you, and bourbon. I've never encountered a patient who said, I went to my doctor and he said, I really need bourbon for my sleep. In fact, imagine a doctor telling you that. Hey, maybe you should just get a really nice bourbon and use that to make you fall asleep. We wouldn't do that. Why? It works if the metric is making you fall asleep faster, make you unconscious quicker. And obviously, I'm being facetious. There are terrible things that go along with alcohol addiction and chronic issues that go along with the consumption of alcohol. But at its core, we're often dealing with something that is changing GABA. So when you think about how does alcohol work in our brain, the two main theories that you often see out there is that it is a GABA agonist and a adenosine antagonist. So GABA is a chemical we've talked about previously in fact, I think we talked about it last week on the blue light episode. That GABA, you can think of that as a neurotransmitter that facilitates relaxation. So it's actually an agonist, a fancy word for something that helps something else. Dopamine agonist. This drug helps dopamine in your body. We often see those used for people who have restless leg syndrome, we talked about in episode 13. So this is acting as a GABA agonist. So it is actually increasing relaxation and therefore speed to sedation. So if you drink enough of it, you get really relaxed, you tend to fall asleep. The other thing that it's typically doing is it's affecting adenosine. And we've talked about adenosine as well. Adenosine is the homeostatic chemical in our brain for sleep. It's the longer we're awake, the more we are producing adenosine. And that accumulation of adenosine tends to make us want to fall asleep. And so coffee, blocks that effect temporarily or whatever. So alcohol has the opposite effect. So alcohol is working with adenosine to help us fall asleep a little bit quicker. Now, we want to distinguish between acute and chronic effects of alcohol. Acute meaning what I'm doing today. I actually don't remember the last time I think the last time I had an alcoholic beverage was, actually, I know what it was. It was last week. We were at Smalls nightclub in New York City watching some jazz performers who were outstanding. And I think I had a Manhattan because I was there. and felt like the right drink. Um, but I haven't really had any drinks since then. So when you're having alcohol that's separated in time like that, acute alcohol, where I have it, then you don't have it for a long time, and then you have it in relatively small amounts, it does tend to shorten the time it takes individuals to fall asleep. It tends to consolidate non-REM sleep and might actually even increase deep sleep in the first half of the night. Sounds great. And one of the things that I often get irritated with sleeping pill commercials, they will say things like, this drug works differently in your brain. Tell us, random doctor with a white coat that we trust. Well, thank you, movie star who takes this drug to fall asleep, but and they got the little model of the brain and there's little circuitries and lights flashing throughout the brain. This drug works differently because it targets neurotransmitters in the brain that inhibit wakefulness or promote sleepiness. Well, that's what all of these things do. That's what again, I have no sponsorship with this company, but the Firestone Nitro Merlin Milk Stout is doing exactly what the doctor in the commercial with the white coat is talking about. It's starting to inhibit wakefulness and it's starting to help promote relaxation. You might hear it soon in my speech if it's working. So there's nothing new to see here with these medications. And I often make the comparison that I'm not sure that your new fancy insomnia curing drug is really doing that much different than this beer in the acute situation. Obviously, they're going to say, well, ours is perfectly safe to take over a long period of time. Well, why? Is it good for us to be prescribing drugs chronically for people? You're just going to take this drug the rest of your life. Why? Well, because I have insomnia. What do you mean by insomnia? Well, I can't sleep. Well, that's not what insomnia is. So it becomes very murky. But in the acute situation, yeah, it's doing some positive things in the first half of the night. As we move to the second half of the night, things are happening. And because of the timing of alcohol and the timing of when we consume it, as well as when it is consumed in these studies, and there's just countless studies on sleep and alcohol, you can see varying differences in terms of what it's actually doing. So, first and foremost, that sedation that was happening is starting to be lifted. We are metabolizing the Firestone Nitro Merlin Milk Stout, and that sedative GABA property is going away. Well, the opposite of sedation is activation. So now we're moving into the second half of the night and we're becoming more and more activated. We are waking up more during the night. We are getting up to go to the bathroom because alcohol is a diuretic. Alcohol can be a diuretic for some people through the entire night. So as we get older, prostates enlarge, we have to go to the bathroom a little bit more during the night in general. This is exacerbating that. So you're trying to sleep better, but you're also giving yourself something that's going to make you have to get up and go to the bathroom. The big thing that's also happening in the second half of the night is that we're having sort of rebounds of that suppressed REM sleep that was happening during the first half of the night. Now, some studies show suppression of REM sleep throughout the night, others mainly in the first half of the night, and it all comes flooding back in the second. And again, that depends on how much alcohol is consumed and when it was consumed. Well, why do we care about REM sleep? Well, REM sleep should be about 20-25% of our night, give or take. It's the sleep that is most linked to concentration, mood, focus, memory, even pain in some studies. So this is not something that we necessarily want to suppress. And because it's all sort of flooding back in the second half of the night, we're having this sort of explosion of REM sleep. We're also having vivid dreams, which a lot of people find to be very unsettling. And remember when we've talked about sleep apnea and we've talked about what was it, the sleep paralysis in episode 16, the demon visiting you at night and sitting on your chest because you can't breathe. Well, in REM sleep, we're paralyzed. So now we are actually shoving all of our REM sleep towards the second half of the night, and we're coupling that with consuming a beverage that is going to suppress respiration. And believe me, as a neurologist in in hospitals, we saw a lot of tragic cases of excessive alcohol coupled with somebody taking some medications for pain, back pain, tooth pain, whatever. And then they also had undiagnosed sleep apnea, which again, when we've talked about sleep apnea, you can breathe or you can sleep, but you cannot do both effectively at the same time. So you interrupt sleep to wake up and catch your breath. Well, if you sedate yourself enough with alcohol or other drugs, that ability to wake up and catch your breath is also impaired, and people can die in their sleep. So again, that works verb becomes very problematic because I don't want my patients taking things that are interrupting their own ability to breathe, to ventilate their bodies. That's not at all what we want. When you start looking at chronic alcohol use, and believe me, when you're looking at alcohol related to insomnia, you see it all over the place because a cycle develops. I can't sleep. I'm getting in bed. I'm just frustrated. I try all these pills. They don't work. But if I drink enough alcohol, I do pass out, and it's awesome. I'm out cold until, the next day. Do people feel good the next day? No. And they've done all kinds of studies where they survey people who are using alcohol to help with their sleep. And by far and away, they sort of ignore the fact that they feel miserable because they're so happy to not have that angst of not being able to fall asleep. In fact, it's interesting. Sometimes individuals will misinterpret that as, well, I just need to drink more because I'm not sleeping. I need to sleep even better. And that's the cycle that you see with chronic alcohol use, which is I fall asleep fast, sleep terribly through the night, wake up the next day, don't feel great, maybe even fall asleep during the day. We've all, had that, drank too much at the holiday party, and the next day you just came home and took a nap, and now you've kind of screwed up your sleep for the upcoming night, which means you got to take even more alcohol to not only get the effect because you're not that sleepy, but also you're developing tolerance to the drug. And that's a real thing with alcohol. So more alcohol, even worse sleep, maybe dangerous sleep, feel terrible the next day, and it's very difficult to get out from under. One of the questions I ask every patient that comes is, do you drink alcohol? Yes or no? And then, regardless of the number, I ask, do you ever use alcohol as a sleep agent? Are you ever using that to quote unquote unwind? I work with a lot of military and police officers. Believe me, the alcohol is front and center in a lot of their lives because think about the things that they're doing and seeing. Being a police officer is tough work. There's a lot of negative emotions attached to that, and a lot of negative emotions coming at them from the public. So, yeah, sitting down when they get home, drinking some beers, that's exactly what they do to quote unwind, helps them fall asleep a little bit faster. So, these are very difficult knots to untie when we start thinking about individuals who are struggling with their sleep. And it's estimated, that the cost of alcohol related sleep disorders, probably somewhere around 18 billion. And that was an old figure from like 5 years ago. The other thing I want to point out before we end this topic is the deep sleep thing. Because I've had people say, well, look, I've read that when you drink alcohol, it does increase your deep sleep. Let's again be very clear. It does in the acute setting, and it does maybe for the first half of the night, but that is not at all going to balance out the net negative that's happening when you're drinking. And if you're somebody who is relying on alcohol, you're using it chronically to fall asleep. One of my very first patients when I started practicing was a man and a woman, a married couple who came in. And she said, I said, hi, I'm Chris. How can I help you? I'm new to this. What can I do for you? And the wife said, I'm here because I'm tired of cleaning red wine off of sheets. I said, I don't really know what that means. And she said, well, every night when my husband goes to bed, he brings red wine with him, stretches out, puts on, Fox News or whatever, and then out cold, spills the wine everywhere, all over the bed. He's out. He's oblivious because he's drunk essentially, and then she's got to clean the red wine out of the sheets. And that was just kind of that's what he did to fall asleep. So I think it's very important that we understand that in individuals with who are using alcohol chronically for sleep, it's making them more sleepy, less recovered, less deep sleep. And when you've got less deep sleep in an equation, you've got less growth hormone, you've got less recovery, you've got less youthfulness and health and all the things that go along with this. Do you ever see the chronic drinker who looked 15 years younger than his or her age? No. It's not positive. So as you all prepare for the holidays, uh, I hope your gift buying is done and you listened to episode 22 and found some really cool things for some people and got some good deals. As you go out to your holiday parties and prepare to celebrate with friends and make the family's eggnog recipe, go easy on the alcohol and never for a minute think that that alcohol is improving your sleep or your performance the next day, because it is not. And I promise you, I will finish the Firestone Nitro Merlin Milk Stout tonight, as I unwind and watch some TV. And I will make a little post tomorrow or sometime later this week about how things went from my perspective, but I'll also throw in there how things went from my wife's perspective, who swears, and I believe her, that when I drink alcohol, I snore more and I talk more. So tune in to social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. That's Dr. Chris Winter for all of them. And I'll tell you exactly what I said at night. So thank you everybody for tuning in. I really appreciate all the support and wonderful reviews. A bunch of you left great reviews of the show, and I really appreciate it. Please like and subscribe, share it with your friends and family this season. And if you've got ideas for topics like our new psychology resident friend mentioned, just DM me and we'll make it happen. So everybody, sleep well.